In the depths of ancient monarchical traditions, behind a facade of unshakable grandeur, events sometimes unfold veiled in absolute silence. Such a tragedy, silent and profound, befell the majestic walls of Edinburgh. Palace chronicles, usually brimming with reports of every significant event, maintained a chilling silence this time. Not a single official announcement was issued, nor were there fanfares for the lavish ceremonial send-offs so customary for royalty. Instead, Princess Anne, a figure whose life was inextricably linked with the spotlight, public attention, and strict adherence to protocol, left her ancient home unnoticed, like an ethereal phantom dissolving into the morning mist. Her loyal staff, whose faces usually displayed imperturbable calm and professional composure, were seen with eyes full of tears. Their unrestrained grief, a rare and shocking display of emotion, unequivocally betrayed the true magnitude of what had occurred, hinting at something far more significant than an ordinary departure. None of those close to her, not even the most discerning observers, could have foreseen such a sudden and dramatic turn of events. Why did the most devoted royal, whose life was inextricably woven into the very fabric of the monarchy in service to the crown, suddenly vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a trail of questions? And what deep, possibly dangerous secret could she have hidden in her own, usually so orderly study? What mysteries lay concealed in the enigmatic diary she left behind, a personal letter from the Queen, a message whose contents remained unknown, and, most intriguingly, a certain final act, rumored not just to shake, but to completely alter the centuries-old balance of power on the throne? The question hanging in the air remains piercingly open. Why did Princess Anne leave forever, irrevocably? This is not just the story of her hidden departure from Edinburgh, but a narrative that promises to uncover a heartbreaking truth. A truth perhaps so inconvenient and explosive that the palace would desperately wish to keep it buried in the deepest secrecy, forever beneath a veil of silence. This event struck everyone like a bolt from the blue. There were no customary royal farewell rituals, no ceremonial fanfares, no official statements that usually accompany the movement of such high-ranking individuals. Princess Anne simply silently left her Edinburgh home. According to her closest associates, this departure was perceived as more than just a relocation. It marked the end of an entire era. It is said that many of the staff who had worked alongside her for over 2 decades could not hold back their tears. One experienced housekeeper, who had dedicated long years of service to the princess, shared a profound sentiment. Anne was incomparably more than just a superior to them. She had become like family, an integral part of their household. Many palace residents desperately tried to find explanations for this sudden and almost unnoticed disappearance, which was so abrupt and inexplicable. Why would Anne leave the people she treated with such unique royal kindness, and the estate she so sincerely cherished and loved? She left no farewell notes, no grand words full of high-flown phrases. However, before settling into the car awaiting her, she handed her private secretary a simple, unassuming envelope. Inside was a concise yet profound message addressed to her staff. "You were my home." In these few words, there was an incredible strength and genuine personal touch, permeating every syllable. Nevertheless, this message, instead of bringing clarity, raised even more troubling questions, as it became increasingly evident with each passing day. Beneath the princess's usually serene and composed exterior, a deep transformation had occurred. Something so all-encompassing and fundamental that it prompted her to leave the place she had sincerely considered her second home for many years. Moreover, informed insiders claimed that her initial words contained not the slightest hint of impending radical changes. However, upon leaving her private apartments, she left something extremely important in her study. There, in one of the carefully concealed drawers, something entirely unexpected and uncharacteristic for a royal was discovered. It was not an official royal document or a formal letter, but merely a humble leather-bound notebook, worn, battered, unassuming, and brown. But, according to circulating reports, what was scribbled on its pages was rumored to shake the very foundations of Buckingham Palace. Immediately before finally leaving Edinburgh, Princess Anne gave another critically important instruction. According to a reliable royal insider, her most senior and infinitely trusted assistant was to personally receive this journal. No one else was to touch it. No outside help, no third-party protection, no external interference. Only one absolutely loyal, unquestionably devoted, and fully trusted individual. The content of these handwritten pages remains a subject of intense scrutiny. Royal observers worldwide are eagerly trying to find an answer to this question, striving to unravel such an intriguing monarchical puzzle. According to available reports, this personal diary spans several years of her life. Page by page, carefully and meticulously written, it records not only events, but also deep feelings, reflections, endured pain, unwavering devotion, and, most curiously, acts of betrayal. Selected excerpts from this text were described as piercingly quiet, yet at times strikingly honest, revealing the most intimate experiences. Currently, a specific phrase is being whispered through the royal corridors. That day, I knew I couldn't stay. What exactly was the princess referring to? Many agree that this brief sentence points to a fateful choice that was made after the Queen's passing. Perhaps Princess Anne could no longer tolerate a certain moment or situation that arose after this event. Even her widely known and legendary devotion to the crown was insufficient to keep her in her former place due to something so profound, exceptionally personal, and all-consuming. One of the prominent figures at court, who dedicated over a decade to serving alongside Princess Anne, was distinguished not only by unyielding loyalty, but also by exceptional insight. Princess Anne undoubtedly deeply adhered to the principles of the monarchy. However, her sense of duty always held the highest position in her hierarchy of values. Over time, she developed an unwavering conviction that some external element, a certain political issue, inherently lacking substance and meaning, was gradually displacing genuine state obligations. As numerous sources attest, in her extensive diary entries, she expressed growing concern about how King Charles was managing state affairs. It is important to emphasize that these entries were not aggressive attacks. Princess Anne never engaged in such intrigues. Rather, they represented restrained observations, at times even prophetic warnings, written with that exceptional degree of candor possible only between siblings. According to available evidence, Anne very rarely mentioned specific names, but each such instance carried deep, significant meaning. Among other things, these personal notes contain unambiguous indications of internal disagreements, private conversations that never became public knowledge, and heated debates among court assistants regarding the most effective way to represent monarchical power. Princess Anne felt an increasing sense of alarm, observing how centuries-old traditions and established customs were gradually losing their strength, yielding to fleeting, transient modern goals. As her entries concluded, a truly astonishing detail emerged. The last entry contained an unequivocal reference to a circumstance no one outside the innermost family circle could even suspect. Queen Elizabeth herself personally drafted the message. Anne kept this letter in the strictest secrecy for several months. Before her passing, the Queen wrote this address, carefully sealed it, and hid it from all prying eyes. It was intended solely for Anne, and no one else. According to the diary, the Queen spoke the following words. She told me the truth. Now I will have to protect it. Suddenly, this story gained a significantly deeper meaning than a simple escape of a princess from the palace. It concerned a secret message destined to be passed down through centuries. It was the monarch's last request, addressed directly to her own daughter. The entire royal family was soon to fully feel the consequences of this hidden message, for everything was destined to change as a result of the discovery of this secret letter. The content of this message became the next shocking twist in this story, revealing Queen Elizabeth's possible hidden choice regarding the future of the kingdom. Conflicting relations with King Charles and the gradual breakdown of family ties marked a new stage in the royal family's life. For long decades, Princess Anne and Prince Charles seemed inseparable. They were united not only by blood, but also by a similar royal upbringing and a shared understanding of duty to the crown. However, as insiders attest, their unity slowly but surely crumbled within the palace walls. This process became particularly evident and irreversible after Queen Elizabeth's passing. On the matter of the monarchy's future, Anne and Charles held diametrically opposed views. A source close to the inner circle indicated that Princess Anne prioritized strict adherence to duty and centuries-old traditions, while King Charles sought to leave behind a completely unique and unparalleled legacy. Tension in their conversations steadily increased, especially when discussions concerned the choice of key figures like Catherine and Camilla, whose future roles caused sharp disagreements. The culmination of tension was Queen Elizabeth's apparent preference for Catherine over Camilla. It is said that King Charles decided to disregard this unspoken wish of his mother. Princess Anne was deeply convinced that ancient customs were not merely being neglected, but purposefully distorted to suit new trends. Moreover, she was directly ordered not to voice her concerns when she tried to express them. Nevertheless, Anne never forgot the wise words her mother quietly whispered to her. Guard the crown from pride, not from change. And when the monarch's message once again appeared before the public, this silent warning gained colossal, unprecedented power. It deeply shook the entire immediate royal circle. This was not mere speculation, nor common gossip that might leak into society columns or spread as whispers among court staff. On the contrary, it was a genuine message, handwritten, meticulously sealed, and intended strictly for confidential review. Just a few weeks after the mournful funeral ceremonies concluded, Princess Anne discovered it among the most personal and cherished belongings of the late Queen Elizabeth, hidden in a miniature leather case decorated with gold embossing depicting her initials. The letter itself was carefully folded. Despite the passage of time and the slight fading of the ink on its pages, the essence of the message remained crystal clear. It was not created for public disclosure, nor intended for storage in official palace archives. Its creation pursued a single purpose. It was to be confidentially delivered to the proper recipients at the appropriate moment. Anne was chosen to safeguard this significant document, as she was considered the late Queen's most reliable confidant and the most loyal of her heirs. It is reported that Princess Anne, upon reading the message, literally froze in a state of profound, albeit silent, shock. The final decision, laid out in these lines, came directly from the Queen herself. It was written from the heart, completely unlike formal press releases or official public statements. Prince Charles was not mentioned in this letter even once. His name was entirely absent. Not a word was said about Camilla either. Her figure remained outside this important message. Only one name appeared in these lines: Catherine. The Queen unequivocally called her the anchor of the future, expressing the highest praise for her innate capacity for service, her disciplined compassion, and unwavering determination. The monarch steadfastly asserted that these invaluable qualities would be vitally necessary for the crown in the years to come. In this message, it was reportedly clearly stated that Catherine's true value should be defined by her resilience, which she consistently demonstrates amidst life's storms, rather than by her high position or noble title. As Princess Anne progressed through the text, the narrative's tone, it seemed, grew increasingly somber and foreboding. When Princess Anne first presented this revelation to Princes William and Charles during a private meeting, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. William was stunned and deeply shaken by what he heard. Charles, in turn, was clearly shocked to his core, as he, without a doubt, had expected all these years that his name, by right of primogeniture, would bear the burden of the royal legacy. One eyewitness present in the room at that fateful moment described what happened as a sound like a clap of thunder, emphasizing the suddenness and destructive force of this news. It was a decision that, contrary to centuries of tradition, was not made in favor of the Queen's son. In the unfolding situation, bloodlines and primogeniture no longer held their former, undisputed significance. Now it all came down to personal qualities, to one's character. And this truly radical change became a genuine, astonishing shock to the entire monarchy, which for many centuries had been built on a strict hierarchy and unwavering order of succession, where birth determined destiny. The message received dispelled the last doubts, confirming Princess Anne's long-held, deeply rooted suspicions. It undeniably testified that her mother, Queen Elizabeth, possessed the gift of foresight, realizing in advance the approaching era of instability and turbulence. In her wisdom and foresight, the Queen entrusted her true intentions and hopes to only one person, whom she believed capable not merely of following the formal lines of succession, but of truly safeguarding the integrity of the royal family and the entire state from impending threats. Queen Elizabeth, as Anne well knew, possessed astonishing perceptiveness and keenness. Her gaze missed no detail. She closely followed the incessant media buzz, the endless intrigues, and internal conflicts tearing apart palace circles. While many other members of the elite sought only fleeting fame, eagerly chasing flashy headlines and public attention, Catherine herself consistently demonstrated an example of quiet, yet absolutely unwavering strength and inner dignity. It is noteworthy that the Queen, in conveying her thoughts through this letter, did not limit herself to merely a general expression of her main idea or concerns. On the contrary, the text contained extremely clear, unambiguous instructions for action that required immediate execution. Anne, realizing the full weight and importance of the information received, could no longer keep it secret, feeling that the time for indecision was over. That is why she made an immediate and firm decision on the next steps to be taken. Excluding any external presence, be it the omnipresent press, numerous palace staff, or even close advisors, Anne organized a meeting that was destined to be truly historic. Only 3 gathered in one room: William, Charles, and herself. In the ensuing, almost palpable silence, the space around them filled not only with the weight of memories, but also the astonishing clarity of the revealed truth. For when Anne carefully placed this message on the table, it ceased to be merely a written sheet of paper. Before them lay a meticulously developed and thoroughly thought-out plan. The future of the entire crown, its destiny and stability, now entirely depended on the outcome of this deeply intimate, yet incredibly fateful meeting. In the late hours of the night, a meeting of extraordinary importance and exceptional confidentiality took place at ancient Windsor, destined to hold a special place in the annals of the monarchical dynasty. Princess Anne, Prince Charles, and Prince William secluded themselves behind tightly closed doors, away from the curious eyes of courtiers and the intrusive lens of omnipresent cameras, in an atmosphere imbued with intimate family closeness and profound personal significance. At this fateful moment, Princess Anne, with particular solemnity, retrieved and placed on the table the message, handwritten by her now-deceased mother. The air was not shaken by loud exclamations or tumultuous displays of emotion. Only calm, yet extraordinarily weighty and deeply significant words were uttered, gaining at that moment a special, piercing power. The future of the throne belongs to Catherine. A prolonged, oppressive silence enveloped the room. Prince William, leaning forward, meticulously read the lines of the message, while Prince Charles, according to witnesses, clenched his jaw, betraying only internal, silent tension. Princess Anne's voice, despite her clear resolve, remained remarkably even and calm when she said, "She entrusted me to show you this before it was too late. She wanted you to know." Every second stretched agonizingly long, as if measuring not just time, but entire eras full of foreboding. This event, undoubtedly, extended far beyond an ordinary family consultation. It foreshadowed truly radical transformations in the destiny of the royal crown. And it was then, as the letter rested between them, that a completely new chapter in the dynasty's history was opened, a chapter destined to elevate to the monarchical throne a figure previously entirely unconceived in this role. The narrative of how Catherine came to be chosen as heir to the throne, and why Anne realized her profound responsibility to preserve and continue the crown's existence, begins to unfold. Unexpectedly for many, it was Catherine who was named the Queen's successor. She never sought widespread recognition or ostentatious display of her merits. She had no need for grand speeches or constant camera attention. Nevertheless, she managed to win the sincere affections of the entire nation. Even more significant was the unspoken approval from Queen Elizabeth II, who often noted Catherine's inner strength within the palace walls, uttering the significant phrase, "She who endures, not she who shouts." According to a royal court employee, Catherine was more inclined to listen attentively than to speak voluminously, and it was this trait that earned her the monarch's complete trust. Catherine earned her high position through her unwavering consistency, which sharply distinguished her from other individuals who entered the royal family with accompanying dramatic changes or controversial issues. The same impeccable elegance was consistently displayed by her at every public appearance, at every charity event, and during every visit to medical facilities. She embodied traditions in her own way, not just passively adopting them, but actively weaving them into her life. Anne, in turn, also noticed this particularity. She always highly valued people who worked diligently and without complaint. And it was in this way that Catherine prompted Anne to deeply reflect on herself. Grand fireworks and dazzling shows proved entirely unnecessary. Long and meticulous work was more than sufficient to establish her authority. After the Queen's passing, the quiet yet consistently strong bonds connecting Princess Anne and Duchess Catherine grew even stronger. Therefore, Anne was not at all surprised to find words in her late mother's personal message where Catherine was referred to as the cornerstone of the times to come. This news brought her profound relief, confirming her own long-held convictions that true service would become the foundation of the future for the crown. In the departed sovereign's opinion, Catherine was already fully fulfilling her duties. However, not everyone received the Queen's message with the same serenity as Princess Anne. The newly appointed monarch reacted particularly sharply, as King Charles's response was filled with denial and undisguised anger. All his life, King Charles had tirelessly awaited his ascension to the throne, and so he reacted so vehemently when his own sister, Princess Anne, sat him down and read the late Queen's confidential letter. This document unequivocally stated that Catherine, not Camilla or Charles himself, was the true hope for the future. "This changes nothing," he reportedly retorted, striking the table with his palm. "But it does," Anne said, louder and more decisively. "It wasn't your choice," she noted directly and unequivocally. The Queen's remarks undoubtedly carried immense weight, and Charles knew this perfectly well. He had spent long years persistently trying to restore Camilla's good name and present her as queen consort. And now, before him lay a letter from his own mother, who subtly but unequivocally defined Catherine as the future, affirmed by faith, not merely by title, according to informed sources. Prince Charles was reportedly in deep confusion and avoided any communication with Anne for several days. The message received rekindled old fears and increased the existing burden associated with continuing his mother's magnificent legacy. Among other things, it clearly highlighted that his and Camilla's popularity significantly lagged behind the widespread affection enjoyed by William and Catherine. Nevertheless, Prince Charles refrained from any public comments or statements. Although there was no official reaction, those who knew his character and manners well could not help but notice the changes that had occurred. His voice became noticeably sharper, and his demeanor felt somewhat distant, as if surrounded by invisible barriers. During this difficult period, Prince William found himself facing an agonizing choice between his deep affection for his wife and his filial loyalty to his father, while Charles himself remained completely silent, lost in his own thoughts. Thus, the heir to the throne, Prince William, found himself in a complex, almost impossible situation, torn between centuries-old traditions of dynastic inheritance and personal heartfelt affection. From a young age, his life had been filled with numerous duties and preparation for his future role. As the firstborn, he was raised in strict accordance with tradition, with the clear goal of following in his father's footsteps, taking on the burden of responsibility for the monarchy's future. Now, however, in what might be a strange turn of fate, his own aunt was strongly urging him to step aside so that his wife could ascend to the throne in a completely different, unexpected way. Prince William remained silent as Anne clearly articulated the Queen's prophetic words. "Catherine safeguards the crown's future." He slowly lowered his head, his hands tightly clasped, betraying his inner tension. According to insiders close to the royal court, he felt not so much dismay at that moment, but profound shock and an overwhelming sense of overload from the unfolding events. For years, William and Catherine had been inseparable partners, closely collaborating in all aspects of their public and private lives. Now, suddenly, a telegram from the Queen dramatically elevated Catherine above her customary status as his wife. presenting her as the true embodiment of dynastic continuity and the monarchy's unwavering, unbreakable strength. Princess Anne, seeking to ease his emotional turmoil, gently reassured him. Your role, undoubtedly, retains its significance, but it now acquires a new direction. What is happening has nothing to do with usurpation or deprivation of authority. On the contrary, it is about finding an innovative way to share this power together. William, undeniably, held deep feelings for Catherine, but the realization that she was prepared to take an independent step, to initiate changes of her own volition, forced him to reevaluate the potential prospects of the future. There was not a shadow of treachery or betrayal in this process. The true underlying reason for what was happening was inevitable evolution. William then faced a difficult choice: either embrace this grand transformation or engage in a desperate struggle against its relentless course. Meanwhile, a considerable distance from Windsor, Princess Anne was already beginning her preparations for an inevitable yet utterly silent farewell, while William was engrossed in agonizing contemplation over making a momentous decision. Princess Anne's final days in historic Edinburgh felt like an astonishing and unsettling calm before the approaching storm. Her Royal Highness's past weeks were marked by an atmosphere of deep seclusion and unwavering tranquility that prevailed in the ancient city. She made no public statements, gave no interviews to the media. Her days were filled only with leisurely strolls through the extensive palace grounds, writing personal messages addressed to loyal staff, and scrupulously adhering to the same strict protocols and rules she had followed for many years of her life. However, Princess Anne's closest friends and family members could not help but notice subtle, barely perceptible changes in her demeanor and appearance. One attentive servant who regularly observed her noted that the princess seemed somewhat distracted, or even bewildered, yet radiated a striking inner serenity, as if resigned to what was to come. Each day, Princess Anne seemed to perform her unique farewell rituals, demonstrating a clear preference for nonverbal signs of expressing her feelings and gratitude. This could be, for example, a touching photograph personally signed for the gardener's son, or a heartfelt note written in her own hand as a thank you to the housekeeper who had diligently brought her morning tea for 15 years. At the same time, her personal diary remained untouched, carefully sealed in her secret drawer. Although Princess Anne did not seek to share her thoughts openly, a certain deep sadness, an unspoken heaviness, something undeniably important that remained beyond words, could be read in her gaze. And what was initially perceived as ordinary silence gradually began to be understood by members of the royal family as a harbinger of significant change, as a crucial and fateful turning point in her life. This atmosphere was particularly keenly felt by those who had loyally served the princess for many decades, dedicating their lives and work to her. For subsequent events irrefutably demonstrated the genuine, unfeigned depth of their affection and sincere devotion to Princess Anne. For the numerous staff, she was not just an employer, but was perceived as a full and integral member of their own family. When the moment came for Princess Anne's final departure from the gates of her Edinburgh residence, there was no official escort, no grand farewell organized, nor were there any public ceremonies or official events held to mark the occasion. Nevertheless, the deep and personal occurrences that unfolded in the silence behind the walls of her home had a far more significant and poignant impact than any lavish royal farewells or official protocols. Court servants lined up in a silent row, their faces clouded with deep sorrow. Many of them had dedicated 2 or even 3 decades of their lives to Her Royal Highness, tirelessly performing their duties. Tears flowed uncontrollably from their eyes, betraying their sincere grief. Some of those present embraced each other, seeking solace in their arms, while others were so stunned they could not utter a single word. One very experienced valet quietly said, "She treated us like people, not just as employees, but as unique individuals." His words reflected the general sentiment. "She was the only princess who knew how to listen attentively," added another footman, hastily wiping his eyes, emphasizing her rare capacity for empathy. Years of loyal service, undoubtedly, played a role, but it was not the sole true reason for their deep affection. The essence lay in how Princess Anne knew how to deeply touch their hearts and souls. She invariably showed genuine appreciation, always noticed their diligent work, and treated everyone with the deepest respect. Princess Anne, without a doubt, highly valued diligence and professionalism in work, but she valued human dignity even more. For the princess herself, this departure meant something far greater than merely the completion of a certain chapter in her life. A particular way of monarchical life was coming to an end, one in which personal fame and public attention receded into the background, yielding entirely to selfless and painstaking work for the good of the crown. The entire staff gathered at this mournful moment deeply realized that something truly priceless, unique, and significant had come to its logical, yet no less sad conclusion. After the cars departed, Anne vanished into the distance, as if disappearing into a misty haze. Meanwhile, beyond the massive gates of Buckingham Palace, a completely different, far deeper storm was brewing, while her own household staff secretly indulged in grief and reflection. As often happens in history, major conflicts begin with a barely perceptible whisper. The silence that enveloped the space after Anne's car drove away from Edinburgh proved to be immeasurably more eloquent than any words she could have spoken. And although her departure was quiet and unnoticed by the outside world, the events that began to unfold beyond the ancient royal gates were far from calm and peaceful. The royal household was deeply shaken by the escalating tension, as if a seismic wave had passed through its ancient walls. Senior staff, numerous aides, and trusted advisors were in a state of complete bewilderment, caused not only by the sudden fact of Anne's departure itself, but also by the immeasurably profound meaning behind this seemingly personal decision. For many within the palace walls, it was much more than just an expression of personal will. It served as an unambiguous and ominous warning. According to information obtained from an informed royal source, irreversible changes had occurred, for, as was said, unless the reason is truly serious, Anne never leaves her post. At the very epicenter of this impending storm was a constantly expanding and deepening rift. On one side of this growing divide stood King Charles and the loyal proponents of traditional monarchy, immutable foundations, and age-old traditions. On the other side, subtly but steadily, Catherine's influence was gaining strength. Perhaps as never before, their positions were solidified not only by Anne's unwavering support, but also by the wise words and guidance of the late Queen, which continued to echo in the corridors of power. Private conversations, held away from public view, became increasingly frequent. Every phrasing in messages was meticulously scrutinized, like a sharpened blade. Special foresight accompanied every public appearance. No one dared to openly address Anne's departure in public, yet this very subject became the sole topic of discussion in hushed tones and behind closed doors. Some courtiers made persistent attempts to downplay the significance of the incident. They adamantly claimed that the event was exclusively personal, without political undertones. Nevertheless, the closest family members did not share their confidence. Simply put, when someone like Anne leaves, it means things have gone terribly wrong, one former staff member succinctly remarked, confirming the general anxiety. Anne had already made her final decision, and she was not going to retreat. She did not see herself as a participant in public debates or sharp discussions. She fully delegated this function to others. While the palace desperately struggled to maintain control over the evolving situation, one question began to resonate louder, overshadowing the others. What is Anne's true legacy? Princess Anne embodies responsibility devoid of theatrics. For over half a century, this royal figure dedicated herself to serving the monarchy, pursuing a single unwavering goal, the impeccable fulfillment of her duties. There was no room for drama or sensational headlines in her activities, only pure, impartial execution of duty. She consistently maintained her composure, deep focus, and characteristic straightforwardness, even when the royal family was often embroiled in numerous disputes or became the object of intense public scrutiny. Princess Anne never presented herself as a victim of circumstances and never sought to be in the spotlight. As one experienced royal correspondent noted, she simply unfailingly performed her duty. Princess Anne's schedule was always exceptionally dense, covering an extensive list of charitable initiatives and military-related obligations. With enviable modesty, she performed over 400 official engagements annually, often surpassing any other royal in this regard. While media attention was often drawn to other members of the royal family, dazzling in exquisite outfits or involved in public disagreements. Princess Anne not only commanded deep respect, but also proved her genuine indispensability through exceptional consistency and dedication to her cause. After she left Edinburgh, withdrawing from public view, many were bewildered. Who could take her place? The answer to this question will not seem trivial, for Anne was incomparably more than just a high-ranking functionary. She was a living metaphor, acting as an invisible bridge connecting the modern structure of the monarchy with its original, old guard. It was she who deeply understood the true meaning of service, placing it above the outward pomp and ostentatious luxury so often associated with royal life. Not the bright glow of glossy magazines, nor the whisper of backroom gossip, will define her true legacy. In the silence of her absence, the memory of how staff shed sincere tears at the moment of her departure will resonate. When circumstances were unfavorable, other members of the royal family turned to her for comfort and reliable support. She did not need to create artificial hype or attract excessive attention to herself. She simply disappeared. And for some incomprehensible reason, her quiet, unnoticed departure made an incomparably deeper impression than the most solemn and loud press release. The family, to whom she provided invisible but much-needed assistance, always acting behind the scenes, must now forge a new path, deprived of the only person who invariably and uncomplainingly stood at her post. All eyes are on the next chapter, as the monarchy is indeed at a crucial turning point as a result of Anne's departure. The crown is undergoing a period of profound transformation. Princess Anne has left her post in Edinburgh. However, the royal family can no longer ignore the fundamental challenge she has left behind. King Charles no longer possesses the silent yet weighty support of his sister when he addresses the public. Moreover, never before has there been such an unprecedented burden to maintain unity, as internal contradictions within the palace walls continue to deepen. Catherine, meanwhile, is advancing to the forefront due to genuine popular affection, not through meticulously crafted official statements. People across the country feel deep sympathy for her because of her unwavering composure in the most difficult circumstances, her striking stability, and her serene, balanced demeanor. Many now admire her not only as a spouse, but as a living embodiment of the future. According to one royal source, the populace trusts her. This circumstance carries colossal power and appears to be an extremely unusual phenomenon. However, with the acquisition of such power, inevitably comes a tremendous burden of responsibility. William now faces an exceptionally complex dilemma. He must skillfully navigate between his unwavering duty to the crown, deep personal affection for his loved ones, and the rapidly transforming landscape of monarchical power. The pressing question arises: will he fully facilitate Catherine taking center stage, or will his own role gradually diminish as her influence and significance grow? A similar challenge also faces Charles. Will he manage to strengthen his traditional vision of governance, or will he be forced to come to terms with the idea that someone else may continue his mother Elizabeth's great legacy? Indeed, the coronation itself and its profound significance in the modern world are no longer based solely on birthright. It is now inextricably linked to genuine leadership, and the current royal family may well be on the verge of a critical breaking point, which, in all likelihood, is a consequence of Anne's departure. It is important to emphasize that this process is not accompanied by any public scandal or loud, shocking incidents. It is a slow but profoundly deep energy shift, a kind of silent rebellion that was carried out through specific action, rather than spoken words. The royal family, undoubtedly, retains the ability to continue wearing their traditional symbols of power, such as majestic crowns, as before. This state of affairs is beyond doubt and an undeniable fact. Nevertheless, it must be acknowledged that the actors themselves have changed, and these are no longer the same individuals they once were. The era of change has already arrived, without waiting for anyone's readiness for it. In this regard, a sharp, pressing question arises: which figures will rise, and which, conversely, will be cast down? And when the answers to these questions extend beyond age-old foundations and established customs, who will dare to bear the burden of leadership and forge a new path? It becomes evident that the upcoming chapter in the annals of the royal dynasty is being created in silence, but with remarkable courage. Princess Anne did not simply withdraw from Edinburgh. As is now known, she left behind something far more significant than just a physical space. A message, a warning, a kind of covenant. The prospects of the royal dynasty will likely never be the same again. Meanwhile, leading global television channels, from New York to London, begin their news broadcasts, displaying alarming economic charts. Financial markets are in a frenzy, and newspaper headlines inspire fear, emblazoned with words like risk, crisis, collapse. And somewhere amidst these unsettling reports, the name of Kishore Mahbubani, a former Singaporean diplomat who for years meticulously studied world powers from within their political systems, cautiously emerges. He tirelessly emphasizes, the pendulum of civilizational development has begun to swing, and its growing inertia cannot be stopped by simple means. Mahbubani is known for his concise formulations. His first formulation states, the 20th century belonged to the Atlantic, the 21st century belongs to Asia. This extremely brief phrase, consisting of just 8 words, conceals vast amounts of data, statistical indicators, as well as the destinies of numerous human societies. If one were to imagine the overall picture in a single image, it would be a depiction of the globe on which the epicenter of global economic activity has shifted approximately 3,500 kilometers eastward over the past 3 decades. The closer it approaches the shores of the Indian Ocean, the more clearly cracks in established geopolitical structures become apparent. Initial signs of this tension are already evident. In the capitals of states that until recently defined the rules of international commerce, today they are discussing not prospects for further growth, but measures for restriction. Public discourse increasingly raises questions about the limits of state budgets, ideological differences between left and right political forces, and the distribution of financial responsibility for upholding generally accepted values. Meanwhile, in the megacities of Shanghai, Bangalore, Jakarta, and even along the corridor between St. Petersburg and Mumbai, which extends to the Arctic Ocean, new ports, airports, and data centers are actively being built. Financial flows are changing direction much like water is redirected when a dam breaks. However, according to Mahbubani, the most vulnerable link is by no means in infrastructure communications, such as pipelines or railway lines. It lies in the delicate sphere of trust. Trust in traditional global institutions, in dominant currencies, and in established mechanisms for protection against economic shocks. When this trust thins and weakens, restrictive measures, initially introduced with firm conviction in their unquestionable effectiveness, unexpectedly turn against their initiators, like a boomerang. It is at this critical juncture that the discussion about Russia's position inevitably arises. Geography, as is well known, remains a constant factor in the world order. From Murmansk to Port Arthur stretches a vast land corridor connecting the European continent with the dynamically developing and powerful consumer market of the Asia-Pacific region, APR. As traditional logistics routes face new restrictions, the Russian Federation is systematically reorienting the flows of valuable resources such as ore, grain, hydrocarbons, and rare earth metals to rail and sea transport, directing them eastward and southward. Undoubtedly, this process represents a complex and large-scale realignment, requiring significant time and capital investment. However, at its core lies a simple economic principle. Demand does not disappear. It merely seeks the most efficient and shortest path to supply. Meanwhile, Western countries are facing escalating inflation that can no longer be explained by random factors. Prices are steadily rising, causing discontent among taxpayers, and entire industries that were yesterday considered pillars of economic prosperity are forced to close branches and relocate production facilities to where energy costs are lower and development prospects are broader. Similar trends are observed in the sphere of world currencies. The dollar still retains its status as a mighty pillar of the global financial system, yet every new transaction concluded in dirhams, yuan, or rupees symbolizes a small but constant pebble being removed from its foundation. Mahbubani warns that one should not expect an immediate change of leadership at the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund. The redistribution of influence, in his opinion, occurs spirally, not in a straight line. Nevertheless, each spiral reduction in the West's share of global GDP inevitably strengthens the voice and significance of regional blocs. Acronyms such as BRICS, SCO, and the African Union, which until recently were perceived merely as designations for conference events, are today transforming into full-fledged platforms for the real distribution of infrastructure loans and technological licenses. And here, the diplomat's second formula becomes apparent. Those who timely occupy positions at the strategic crossroads of new global routes will secure economic rent for a generation to come. For the Russian Federation, this key crossroads is represented by the trans-Eurasian corridors, such as north-south and east-west, as well as Arctic container lines and large-scale energy networks connecting Yamal with the Yangtze Delta. For each of these strategic branches, bilateral and multilateral agreements are already being actively concluded, joint ventures are being formed, and test sites for innovative unmanned logistics platforms are being launched. Some skeptical observers might ask, what about technological pressure, with chip blockades, export bans, and fierce patent battles? In response, Mahbubani pragmatically asserts that the concept of a laboratory extends far beyond a sterile room in Silicon Valley. It also includes a classroom in Seoul, an innovative technopark in Novosibirsk, and a university campus in Kuala Lumpur. He emphasizes that a mind whose door is closed seeks a window. As a result, new interstate and corporate alliances are emerging, where transactions conducted in digital currencies are organically integrated with operating systems developed simultaneously in 3 languages. Where does this complex interplay of currencies, transport routes, and high-tech chips lead? The diplomat analyst states that it leads to a fundamental transformation of the very perception of wealth. If financial capital previously sought concentration and stability in a limited number of traditional Western havens, it must now diversify and disperse across dozens of nodes to minimize dependence on a single controlling center. Banking and insurance products, developing in accordance with this new logic, acquire a more complex structure and, consequently, increase in price. However, when intermediation costs increase, new prospects inevitably open up for those market participants who are willing to take risks directly, without involving third parties. An era is dawning when demographic trends begin to play a key role in the global balance of power. Population aging is a characteristic feature of Western societies, placing a dual burden on them: the need to support constantly increasing social obligations, while simultaneously maintaining leading positions in the scientific and engineering fields. At the same time, Asian countries, with young and dynamically developing megacities of millions, provide a new generation of technical specialists and entrepreneurs with a unique chance to build literally from scratch, including in the global infrastructure, even those regions where reliable internet connection was recently absent. The Russian Federation, at the intersection of these powerful geopolitical and economic currents, faces a choice of its role: to remain a raw material appendage, become a key transit hub, or transform into a full-fledged high-tech partner. The future of the country will be determined by the speed and effectiveness with which the accumulated expertise of the Soviet scientific legacy, as well as raw material export revenues, are transformed into advanced digital services, breakthrough biotechnologies, and innovative next-generation space platforms. Enthusiasts of apocalyptic forecasts often ask, will the entire global system suddenly and catastrophically collapse at once? However, the renowned thinker Kishore Mahbubani urges a more rational and balanced view of historical processes. History demonstrates that great empires very rarely disappear from the world stage instantaneously. A much more common scenario is one where they gradually delegate some of their powers, while retaining significant symbolic capital, cultural influence through language, recognizable brands, and authoritative expert platforms. In such a transitional era, it is crucial for states metaphorically referred to as energy fueling stations, or beacon economies, not to succumb to the temptation of revanche, but rather to strive for integration into the emerging system of new global obligations and interconnections. This is precisely how unique hybrid alliances are formed, within which joint educational institutions successfully operate despite intense corporate competition, and scientific research results are published in parallel with ongoing diplomatic debates. A natural question arises: how should an individual, observing this rapidly changing global panorama from their private abode, act? Kishore Mahbubani, despite his high diplomatic status and extensive international experience, offers surprisingly pragmatic and, in essence, very down-to-earth advice, learn incessantly. He strongly recommends mastering the languages of those dynamically developing regions where new global centers of economic growth are actively forming today. Furthermore, it is crucially important to closely monitor the transformation of global value chains, understanding how wealth flows are being redistributed. Finally, to ensure personal financial stability, one should place their savings in a carefully diversified basket of assets. While acknowledging that such measures cannot serve as an absolute guarantee of complete protection from all possible risks, Mahbubani emphasizes, this, in essence, is a path to a new world where opportunities and chances for success are distributed significantly wider and more frequently than before. No less significant, and perhaps even defining today, is the technological factor. The rapid development of areas such as artificial intelligence, as well as the emergence and spread of bio and fintech platforms, drastically shortens the time interval between the genesis of an innovative idea and its full launch as a finished product or service. This process has reached a scale that, just 20 years ago, seemed exclusive to science fiction. In this context, states capable of ensuring full digital sovereignty gain a colossal advantage. They will not only be able to retain the most valuable talent and qualified specialists within their borders, but also maintain a significant tax base. This, in turn, will allow them to direct funds towards financing areas previously considered the exclusive prerogative of the golden billion, namely, the development of fundamental science, support for culture and arts, and the implementation of large-scale, long-term infrastructure megaprojects requiring significant capital investment. It is at this point that the narrative returns to its initial starting frame, completing the circle of reasoning. Plummeting graphs on major Western exchanges, symbolizing slowdown and uncertainty, create a striking contrast with the dynamic evening panorama of an Asian megacity. Here, against the backdrop of glittering lights, construction cranes continue their tireless work even deep into the night, serving as clear evidence of continuous growth and development. It is evident that the global pendulum of world influence has swung noticeably, shifting eastward. And, judging by all indications, its reversal, if it occurs at all, will be significantly slower and more difficult than those who previously held undisputed dominance on the world stage, the former hegemons, might have assumed or planned. This is precisely the unique scheme of world order proposed by the little-known Singaporean prognosticator. On this scheme, there are no final destinations. Instead, there are only vast paths full of potential. And today it becomes clear. The closer one is to the intersections of these promising paths, the higher the probability for individual actors to chart their own course, acting not through loud declarations or solemn ceremonies, but with a deep, pragmatic calculation that the coming century will indeed be marked by the dominance of the East. Nevertheless, this strategic map alone cannot reveal the full complexity of the landscape until one approaches the directions where the most powerful impulses of transformation are concentrated. Behind the obvious drive for economic reorientation, a large-scale energy transformation is quietly but confidently taking shape. While public discourse and newspaper headlines are filled with debates about oil price fluctuations, unnoticed by the general public, and without any flashy appeals, Asian countries and their adjacent territories are actively accumulating a critical mass in the field of low-carbon energy. The People's Republic of China, India, and the member states of the association of Southeast Asian nations are effectively competing in the speed of saturating their domestic markets with inexpensive electricity generated from solar panels and wind turbines, while simultaneously increasing export volumes of batteries and rare earth metals. For the Russian Federation, this is much more than just an opportunity to diversify its financial revenues. This initiative represents an offer to act as a key connecting link, providing South Asian production clusters with unique resources that cannot be extracted without developing the northern latitudes. Thus, a very delicate and mutually beneficial deal is forming. Eastern countries receive the necessary kilowatts of energy, and in return, they transfer advanced algorithms for optimizing network infrastructure. These high-tech tools were, until recently, supplied by American and European consultants at very high, premium rates. Ultimately, the familiar equation linking raw materials and technologies unexpectedly finds its solution, bypassing traditional global hubs. It is noteworthy that this is no longer a speculative concept, but is confirmed by real statistical data on numerous contracts concluded directly amidst active debates about the global green transition. However, the energy sector represents only one of the key cross-cutting arteries shaping the contours of future continental development. The second, no less significant, concerns ensuring food security. In this area, analytical forecasts operate with such impressive numerical indicators that major news agencies rarely pay due attention. Countries such as Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Vietnam are confidently entering a phase of active middle-class growth. Such dynamics transform traditional agricultural crops like rice, corn, and soybeans into powerful instruments of geopolitical influence, comparable in significance to energy pipelines. In this context, the vast Eurasian steppes, encompassing the territories of the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan, are gradually becoming the primary calorie reservoir, capable of meeting the needs of a colossal number of consumers, reaching 2 billion people. Mahbubani, with his characteristic insight, cautiously points out, "He who invests in smart agrochemistry and plant genomics today dictates tomorrow not politics, but planting schedules and port terminal logistics." For some, these aspects may seem mundane and even tedious, yet it is precisely such seemingly minor details that have determined the dominance of the American states of Nebraska and Iowa over the past 2 decades. Consequently, they are capable of shaping a different global superiority if shipping routes change. The third crucial aspect is climate geopolitics. Amidst the shifting of traditional financial centers, new participants in the global market are trading not only material goods, but also greenhouse gas emission indicators. Into this complex game, the Russian Federation enters as a green donor, possessing extensive resources for forest carbon sequestration. While the G7 countries engage in lively discussions about the cost of 1 ton of CO2, Siberian cedars continue to grow, and for every hectare of these forest areas, negotiating positions are already prepared for the creation of future exchange instruments. European states are attempting to establish barriers in the form of cross-border carbon taxes, but for railway trains and pipelines, it is much simpler to change direction to where carbon certificates can be sold at a higher price. Thus, forests and taiga cease to be merely picturesque elements of romantic landscapes with moose and footbridges to secluded cabins. They transform into a full-fledged registry of assets, actively moving along with trade flows heading eastward. No less significant is the information front, which demands close attention. As significant financial and trade flows steadily shift towards regions located beyond the Urals, the confrontation for dominance in interpreting facts becomes increasingly fierce. In this context, new content laws are actively applied, digital platforms are thoroughly scrutinized, and strict restrictions on code exchange are imposed. Western regulators, for their part, do not hesitate to resort to threats of significant fines. Meanwhile, Eastern powers are actively forming digital Silk Roads, where data circulates freely, bypassing American servers. It is in this area that Russia can fully leverage its long-standing traditions and outstanding achievements in cryptography and applied mathematics. By developing its own innovative cloud solutions, it simultaneously integrates with leading Asian fintech centers, thereby creating transaction routes that remain immune to sanctions without risking the entire global system. In this new, dynamically developing environment, any information leak can result in losses comparable to a major corporation's quarterly budget, while successful data protection can yield profits equivalent to the extraction of 2 large gas fields. The next, equally important aspect of these transformations is the sphere of cultural soft power. While scientists and public figures engage in lively discussions about the advisability of dismantling elements of colonial architecture, students from cities like Chengdu, Sevastopol, and Jodhpur are jointly creating TV series that are broadcast on shared streaming services, without requiring a Hollywood license. Songs with lyrics written in 3 languages simultaneously are rapidly accumulating billions of streams worldwide. And then, to the surprise of many, it turns out that defining taste trends are no longer formed at prestigious ceremonies like the Grammys, but at vibrant cultural festivals taking place in cities like Batumi and Vladivostok. Mahbubani, the distinguished thinker, emphasizes that although English retains its position as a means of communication, its intrinsic content, embedded values, and cultural context are changing significantly. In this dynamic, even widely discussed scandals related to content blocking actually benefit new generations of producers and creators. Audiences seeking fresh, unconventional approaches and alternative perspectives actively turn to new sources, and digital platform algorithms, in turn, offer precisely those video materials that are deeply rooted in the archetypes of an entirely different civilizational paradigm. Further development of the arguments smoothly leads to a consideration of questions concerning each person's individual trajectory. Mahbubani returns to his key thesis, persistently emphasizing that the lessons of geopolitics and the understanding of global processes are important not just for creating beautiful analytical maps or theoretical constructs, but primarily for making concrete, conscious choices in daily life and professional activity. This principle finds its vivid confirmation in a number of practical examples. For instance, a professional developer who is currently mastering 3 different programming systems gains the future ability to confidently position themselves anywhere in the world, without being tied to a single certification center or one labor market. Similarly, a far-sighted investor who strategically distributes their assets among reliable Singaporean infrastructure bonds, dynamic Eurasian commodity indices, and promising Brazilian technology funds, consciously creates a kind of financial cushion. This buffer serves as a reliable safety net, making it significantly less anxious to navigate through subsequent economic downturns or market upheavals. And even an ordinary viewer who takes the initiative to learn languages like Indonesian or Farsi effectively opens up a vast market of hundreds of millions of potential clients. In this new space, competition remains at a surprisingly low level, offering unique opportunities for development and growth. Deep psychology always underlies visible statistical indicators. An individual who grew up and developed during the era of unconditional Western model superiority often experiences deep aversion to the very idea of a multipolar world order emerging. Hence arise tense debates and irreconcilable clashes over interpretations of historical narratives. For Russia, this period appears as significant emotional turbulence, simultaneously representing a dual challenge and a unique historical opportunity. On the one hand, it is crucial to avoid the temptation of excessive triumphalism, constantly remembering that the historical pendulum will inevitably swing back. On the other hand, it is necessary not to miss the favorable conjuncture when there is an opportunity to reshape the global rules of the game in one's favor, cementing them in universal standards of security, logistics, and international trade. This is significantly less noticeable than loud declarations and victorious reports. Yet it is precisely such modest but strategically important points of international agreements that determine the vectors of global capital movement for many decades to come. After all, as the renowned thinker Mahbubani reminds us, the long-term strategic game is won not through swift attacks, but through the skillful and deliberate positioning of all pieces on the chessboard. In the modern era, geopolitical pieces move infrequently, but each such movement is driven by the actions of influential funds and institutions that meticulously analyze all possible scenarios and chances. Russia, situated at the crossroads of 2 civilizational behemoths, Europe and Asia, faces a choice: to retain the role of a transit corridor, or to transform into a self-sufficient center of world power. The fateful decision lies not in momentary political rhetoric, but in concrete achievements recorded under Project Office after 5 years and patent applications after 10 years. The fundamental wisdom expressed by the Singaporean diplomat is evident. Great civilizations rise not through loud declarations or empty promises, but through skillful management and overcoming their own internal and external limitations. While some immerse themselves in fruitless debates about finding culprits, other states and societies manage to transform geographical and cultural boundaries into fertile points of contact, and existing differences into a powerful catalyst for the development of commerce and mutually beneficial exchange. Historically, Eastern civilizations tend to think in terms of centuries, while the Western world focuses on shorter, decade-long planning horizons. The Russian Federation, in turn, possesses the extraordinary ability to simultaneously exist and operate within these 2 vastly different temporal paradigms. Consequently, the current window of opportunity that has opened before the world cannot be adequately assessed solely by fluctuations in a single currency's exchange rate or by the popularity level of one political party. Its true value is determined by the readiness and ability to actively participate in the emerging multipolar geopolitical game, where at stake is not mere yield on government bonds, but the very dynamics and pace of transformation of the entire global system. It is at this pivotal moment that awareness dawns, when any observer delving into the essence of what is happening understands. Analytical forecasts and predictions of the future are neither frightening prophecies nor comforting fairy tales, but serve as a crucial tool for strategic navigation. In today's world, where geographical factors actively influence the redistribution of capital, where ecological challenges radically change societal priorities, and where cultural trends give rise to entirely new canons of aesthetics and beauty, the actor who demonstrates the ability to simultaneously interpret and account for multiple disparate signals and road signs gains an undeniable advantage. The statements of the high-ranking Singaporean diplomat should not be taken as an exhaustive instruction for action, but rather as an urgent invitation to consciously step onto the historical crossroads to independently decide on the further path and lane of travel, while many other international actors remain stagnant, as if stuck in a traffic jam, constantly looking back at outdated landmarks and signs of the past century. The financial prospects opened up by the development of biomedicine promise colossal revenues, far exceeding a single zero. However, the sphere of finance extends significantly beyond merely securing the future of medicine. It is a universal language through which any concepts are translated into the dynamic movement of numerical indicators. Today, central bank digital currencies are confidently moving through pilot testing phases. Payment systems in Singapore and Abu Dhabi have already begun processing transactions that bypass traditional, often cumbersome correspondent bank chains. Such innovations allow for commission fees to be reduced to almost zero, and settlement speeds approach instantaneous. In this new reality, banking institutions must fundamentally rethink their business models. From now on, the key value is not so much access to dollar liquidity, but the ability to quickly decrypt and analyze vast amounts of transaction data in real time. For the Russian Federation, the strategic course in this changing world of finance is crystal clear. Regional centers like Novosibirsk or Kaliningrad have the potential to transform into transaction pre-qualification hubs, where advanced fintech solutions organically combine with regulatory oversight and machine learning capabilities. The more reliable and efficient such a filter becomes, the higher the level of trust from partners, and in the emerging financial system, trust is consistently valued significantly higher than the usual annual interest rate. Amidst these global shifts, the education system is also undergoing significant changes. The classic university campus, with its traditional offices and lecture halls, is no longer the sole and unalternative path to professional employment. Modern universities are transforming, dividing into hybrid structural elements. For example, a research laboratory in Tomsk might conduct a course on quantum communications in close collaboration with a seminar from Jeju Island. And a student could complete their final internship in a virtual accelerator located in Istanbul. The value of such integration lies in the unprecedented speed of educational program updates. Curricula that draw on current data and experience from 5 or 6 different countries respond to market dynamics significantly faster than local educational standards. For graduates, this opens the prospect of securing a multi-currency contract at the very beginning of their career. And for the state, it provides the opportunity to retain talented specialists by offering them participation in world-class projects without needing to leave their native language and time zone. The next stage of global transformation is focused on logistics. Ancient trade routes, once considered mere metaphors, are regaining their literal meaning. Specifically, the North-South corridor is demonstrating accelerated development thanks to the implementation of autonomous trucks capable of tracking minute changes in terrain and adjusting their route without direct human intervention. Key port hubs like Mumbai and Bandar Abbas are actively modernizing their crane equipment to handle containers equipped with special sensors, allowing customs services to monitor their contents in real time. In this new architecture, Russia assumes the role of a strategic transit dispatcher. Satellites located at high latitudes form a continuous communication channel in the form of a northern arc, effectively bypassing congested equatorial orbits. Thus, the transport system transforms into a complex algorithm. Whoever controls this software code gains the ability to regulate the entire flow of goods and data. It is code management, not physical distance, that becomes the defining factor in shaping trade margins. Meanwhile, the cultural sphere is actively reshaping public perception of this emerging global map. Eastern streaming platforms have already entered the era of neuroplayers, innovative applications capable of adapting content storylines to individual user reactions and preferences. As a result, a series started in Seoul might conclude with a finale specifically generated for a viewer, for example, in Kazan. Characters in such productions communicate in a mix of English, Indonesian, and Russian, while subtitles dynamically adjust to the audience's reading speed. This phenomenon extends far beyond mere entertainment. Such a content machine subtly transmits values of cooperation and mutual benefit, avoiding direct didacticism. When an audience accepts and internalizes a new cultural grammar, trade and educational barriers begin to crumble significantly faster than under the influence of traditional intergovernmental memorandums. In the modern world, environmental initiatives are no longer solely a cost item, but are transforming into a full-fledged source of income. Joint exchanges for trading carbon credits are being launched across vast territories of Asia and Eurasia. Under this new approach, unique natural assets, such as the extensive forests of Yakutia, the picturesque coral reefs of Indonesia, and the boundless steppes of Mongolia, are combined into a diversified portfolio specifically designed to minimize risks associated with climate change. An investor purchasing a futures contract guaranteeing the preservation of a hectare of taiga forest thereby directly secures funding for the implementation of advanced firefighting drones and efficient drip irrigation systems. Notably, the profitability of such contracts correlates significantly less with fluctuations in commodity prices, and much more strongly depends on the thoroughness and quality of the environmental monitoring performed. In this context, Russia possesses a unique opportunity to assume a leading position as an auditor of natural capital. It can leverage its advanced capabilities, including Arctic satellites and specialized forest genetics institutions, to irrefutably confirm that every issued certificate is genuinely backed by a real natural asset, rather than being an ephemeral image. This marks the formation and completion of a qualitatively new development cycle, founded on the principle of interconnectedness, where financial flows stimulate progress in education. The knowledge and skills acquired, in turn, give rise to advanced technologies essential for optimizing logistics systems. Efficient logistics, by overcoming barriers, opens up new markets for cultural exchange and the dissemination of values. Cultural transformations, in turn, deeply embed and solidify environmental investments, making them an integral part of public consciousness and the economy. The field of possibilities is gradually shifting, and the vector of civilizational development points towards a future where flows of data, energy, and human potential seamlessly cross once insurmountable borders. Every individual now faces a fateful choice: to actively engage in this rapid current of change, or remain a mere spectator, as this unique window of opportunity will not remain open indefinitely. Artificial intelligence is steadily transforming from a standalone industry into a ubiquitous, almost imperceptible foundation underlying every modern process. Financial markets, for instance, no longer depend on lengthy analytical reports. Instead, stock exchange systems now independently assess risks based on instantaneous analysis of millions of transactions completed in the last hour. In the agricultural sector, a farmer no longer needs television weather forecasts. Thanks to detailed satellite imagery and a network of soil sensors, crop yields are predicted by a field station directly on board their tractor. Within the global landscape of this technology's development, Russian research clusters contribute by providing a robust mathematical foundation and the advantages of affordable cooling in northern data centers. Meanwhile, Asian educational institutions ensure unprecedented speed in specialist training and mass implementation. Large Middle Eastern funds finance large-scale projects, covering significant expenses. All these areas, from speech recognition, algorithms and insurance premium calculations to the design of innovative materials, converge in a unified cloud space. Here, patents lose relevance with such rapidity that they sometimes outpace the speed at which board meetings can be convened. Under this same virtual roof, a new measure of influence emerges. The depth and complexity of a trained neural network are now valued significantly higher than the physical square footage of office spaces. Notably, a consortium of 3 leading universities is already launching an online master's program where students, from their very first days, learn to write code for unmanned vehicles, complex medical scanners, and banking terminals. Furthermore, the cost of a megawatt of electricity in cold northern locations is substantially lower than in densely populated southern megacities, leading to a natural relocation of heavy computing tasks to northern rivers. The faster a developed model transitions from the testing environment to the industrial implementation phase, the greater the market advantage, measured in months, and sometimes even years. Information flows rapidly along fiber optic networks laid alongside railway corridors. Synchronously with these flows, containers loaded with necessary components are placed on the same rails, arriving at the assembly plant the very next day. Such dynamic traffic creates a steady demand for an entirely new type of professional. A specialist fluent in 3 programming languages, and at least 1 Eastern dialect, can now sign a multi-currency contract without leaving their hometown. States actively offering grants for open-source experiments successfully retain talented specialists by eliminating visa barriers and bringing decision-making centers closer to their borders. While some global markets are immersed in discussions about regulation, others are methodically accumulating a critical mass of competencies capable of fundamentally rewriting the existing map of global industry. To an outside observer, what is happening in the high latitudes might seem like mere background noise, but for a discerning investor, it is a clear signal of a fundamental shift in the economic paradigm. It means that the product development and delivery cycle has significantly accelerated, and consequently, capital must now seek new, more promising avenues for investment. The northern sea routes were traditionally perceived as an insurmountable barrier for global shipping, but the implementation of advanced technologies is radically changing this established equation. For instance, a container ship transiting the northern sea route can save up to an entire week compared to traditional routes through the Suez Canal, while multi-hour queues in the canal cease to be a risk factor for logistics. Modern low-orbit satellites provide near real-time imagery of ice conditions. This enables ship captains to receive precise data on ice thickness with meter-level accuracy, while powerful nuclear-powered icebreakers ensure the maintenance of an open shipping corridor even in the darkness of the polar February. For the Russian Federation, this is not merely a source of income from transit fees, but also an opportunity to develop a comprehensive service center. Here, reactors are repaired, strategic natural gas reserves are stored, and specialized satellite dishes designed for operation in polar orbits are assembled. Technology. Parks are actively being established and developed in coastal areas, where new materials capable of withstanding extreme temperatures down to -50 degrees Celsius and the aggressive effects of harsh salty winds are tested. The adoption of automated drilling platforms significantly reduces costs for shift personnel, and innovative drone pipe layers lay underwater communications without direct crew involvement. Significant investments are directed towards the construction of liquefied natural gas storage facilities, the creation of terminals for transshipping rare earth elements, and the development of experimental algae farms intended for the production of a new generation of biodiesel fuel. While Europe carefully observes these processes, Asian countries are actively financing them. Thus, Russian ports are transforming into key hubs, effectively connecting 2 great oceans. The value of this key route extends far beyond mere tariff rates. As physical goods begin to move, the speed of information exchange steadily increases. Each voyage along such a route accumulates gigabytes of data concerning weather conditions, equipment technical status, and current freight prices. These vast data sets are subsequently sold to insurers, regulators, and brokers, thereby generating an additional source of income. Once the Arctic corridor achieves the same familiar and routine status as transatlantic routes, a significant increase in land value is expected in polar cities. Companies accustomed to warmer latitudes will actively begin opening branches under the northern sky. This soft, non-obvious appeal sprouts precisely where it is least expected. Examples include marathons in Nur-Sultan and Vladivostok, which attract athletes from 3 continents, and a gastronomic festival in Kamchatka successfully sells masterclasses even to Singaporean culinary schools. A student who comes for the Baikal Triathlon often decides to stay for a summer course on neural networks, while simultaneously organizing a hackathon for local school children. Such events serve as powerful tools for strengthening informal ties that can survive even in the most challenging diplomatic conditions. The calendar of sports events harmoniously combines with the tourist season, and an educational component is organically added to them. Joint restoration projects are saving ancient fortresses located along the Great Steppe, transforming them into modern interactive museums under the unified brand, New Silk Arc. A traveler purchasing a ticket for such a historical route simultaneously gains access to a course on ancient irrigation systems, and unexpectedly finds themselves investing in a modern startup dedicated to reviving these technologies in southern fields. This forms a holistic ecosystem where cultural exchange acts as a kind of insurance for businesses, protecting them from sharp economic shocks. Unified standards for ecological certification of tourist trails and a common medical protocol for sports camps make a sudden rupture of established ties virtually impossible. Authorities, commercial enterprises, and volunteers find themselves closely bound by a common schedule in which real financial resources and reputational capital have already been invested. Eastern partners particularly value the region's unique natural beauty, Western partners, its advanced engineering school, and Southern partners, its distinctive brand of northern exoticism. Whoever can first provide guests with a fast visa, quality communication, and a direct flight will secure the flow of people, ideas, and services for many years to come. Moreover, sometimes a simple finisher's medal from a sports competition or a joint film project can change the perception of an entire region far more powerfully than holding a dozen traditional economic forums. Under the radar, without much fanfare, the initial segment of a quantum communication network is already being integrated into Eurasia's vast infrastructure. Its presence is barely noticeable on geographical maps. Underwater cables run along the bottom of the Caspian Sea. Relay stations are cleverly disguised as standard data centers, and the branding of the implementing companies often has a local character. However, the profound purpose of this undertaking is clear to all involved: to form an information channel that provides absolute protection against unauthorized access, even decades from now, when the performance of traditional computing machines significantly increases. While statesmen discuss cryptographic methods, physicists are meticulously creating components in which entangled photons transmit keys without generating any duplicates. This approach transforms any data, be it financial transactions, medical records, or engineering drawings, into a sealed message that cannot be opened without compromising its integrity. Following this innovation, a fundamentally different service emerges on the market: the sovereign cloud cell. By using it, an enterprise leases not just a computational server, but effectively a part of a quantum tunnel, which provides an inviolable guarantee. Information will only leave the state in the form of generalized statistical data. From now on, those who previously spent impressive sums on creating complex legal barriers and numerous confidentiality agreements are investing in the fundamental laws of physics, rather than ephemeral paper declarations. Financial institutions and innovative biotechnological startups are leading the list of those eager to take advantage of this benefit. Soon, the film industry will join them, for which preventing any script leaks before the official premiere is critically important. To minimize the barrier to entry and stimulate widespread adoption, engineering teams are providing core protocols in open access. The source code is hosted on specialized repositories simultaneously in 3 key languages: Russian, Indonesian, and English. Such transparency significantly reduces integration costs. Thus, a startup from Samara can connect to this advanced network as quickly as a student research laboratory in Kuala Lumpur. A test data packet is sent along a route passing through Kazan, Tehran, and Bangalore. If the quantum counter detects any breach of integrity, the current connection is instantly terminated, and an alternative route via Bishkek is automatically formed. The insurance sector shows an immediate reaction to these changes. The cost of a policy covering operations within the quantum circuit is half that of traditional traffic. Increased trust in the new communication channel radically transforms the e-commerce model. Now, commercial contracts are certified with digital signatures, and financial transactions are completed in seconds, as correspondent banks no longer need manual authenticity verification. Payment is integrated with a smart check, and goods shipment from the warehouse begins even before the accounting department manages to mark payment as received. A consumer from Astana ordering equipment in Nizhny Novgorod can track container movement in the same unified interface where the corresponding invoice is stored. Thus, geographical distance ceases to be a determining factor in cost. Far more important becomes the speed with which the algorithm confirms the authenticity of each transaction. The boundaries of digital infrastructure are steadily expanding, reaching the most remote rural areas. Where traditional fourth-generation mobile phone towers stood until recently, compact micronodes powered by solar panels are now being universally installed. These innovative devices take on a significant portion of the computational load, which substantially reduces data transmission latency and paves the way for the implementation of revolutionary technologies such as precision agriculture, the development of telemedicine, and the creation of local VR campuses. A new generation agriculturalist studying in college can now not only connect to a specialized lecture on rare agricultural crops delivered by a leading expert from CNU, but also simultaneously download a detailed satellite map showing the nitrogen content levels on their land. Diverse media content is also transmitted over these high-speed channels. Advanced generative models capable of simultaneous dubbing provide voiceovers for video materials in 12 languages at once, miraculously preserving the unique voice timbre of the original author. Thus, a video channel created in Krasnoyarsk can easily appear in recommended lists for users in the Indian segment of the network, while a blogger from Jaipur suddenly pops up in personalized selections for a Moscow viewer. This generates an unprecedented effect of global cultural exchange and diversity. Media content achieves truly global status on the day the first episode is released, completely freed from traditional restrictions associated with the need to acquire distribution rights. It is noteworthy that one of the most fundamental aspects of this transformation, the development of the quantum layer, despite its apparent futurism, remains largely unnoticed in daily news reports. Like a powerful root system, it invisibly but steadily expands beneath the surface, preparing the ground for the emergence of an entirely new, revolutionary branch of the global economy. While loud predictions about the inevitable end of the era of globalization reverberate repeatedly in the public sphere, the barely audible click of a fiber optic switch serves as a silent but compelling reminder that integration processes are not stopping at all. On the contrary, they are actively seeking and mastering new, more resilient channels that cannot be severed with ordinary tools. What is truly happening when the world's familiar axes slowly but steadily turn towards the New East, and established channels of influence crack under the weight of increasing numbers, energy, and ambitions? The shifting global economic center of gravity and the emergence of independent technological ecosystems are unfolding before contemporary eyes. While stock indices show nervousness along future transcontinental trade arteries, lab cities are already rising, quantum tunnels are forming, and powerful university clusters are developing. One can imagine how, in just a few years, any bank transfer will occur in fractions of a second over a securely protected Eurasian network. A television series produced in Novosibirsk will be instantly dubbed into Malay, and students from Tomsk and Chengdu will jointly launch an ultralight microsatellite into space. This is not futurological speculation, but represents the next stage that humanity is approaching today. Observers see new alliances forming, uniting advanced technologies, biomedicine, and culture. However, the main question remains: who will be the first to adapt and transform this tectonic shift into a personal opportunity? What secret negotiations were held within the walls of Buckingham Palace? And most importantly, how did Catherine herself react to all of this, upon learning the contents of the late Queen's letter? In the week following Princess Anne's departure from Edinburgh, the atmosphere at Buckingham Palace reached an extreme level of tension. The majestic corridors, usually filled with the measured echoes of daily activity, were now permeated by anxious whispers and wary glances, creating an air of widespread unease. The king's senior advisors continuously convened emergency meetings, their doors tightly shut, and security presence noticeably doubled, indicating the exceptional nature of the situation. The Lord Chamberlain, one of the most influential and trusted courtiers, was seen entering King Charles's private chambers 3 times in a single day. This unprecedented frequency of audiences could not go unnoticed by attentive observers and analysts. According to a source closely connected to the royal court, these meetings were urgent crisis management sessions. "We are not dealing simply with a family disagreement, but with a potential constitutional crisis," one high-ranking official allegedly stated, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, the king's private secretaries worked on high alert, meticulously monitoring every mention of Princess Anne's departure in the press and diligently preparing various scenarios for official statements. However, none of these statements were ever published, a clear testament to how delicate and volatile the situation had become. Queen Consort Camilla, according to insider reports, was profoundly shocked after reading the contents of the late Queen Elizabeth's personal letter. A woman who had, for many decades, stubbornly fought to gain recognition and respect from both members of the royal family and the broader public, suddenly found herself face to face with a harsh reality. Her august predecessor envisioned the future of the monarchy in a completely different light. One of Camilla's close friends revealed that she spent several days in complete seclusion in her private chambers, canceling all previously scheduled engagements and meetings. She felt betrayed, but not by Charles or the family, but by history itself, the source shared. Camilla realized that her position, which had seemed unshakable after the coronation ceremony, was now called into question not by external critics, but by the direct will of the departed monarch. Particularly agonizing for her was the realization that Queen Elizabeth, who in the final years of her life seemed to have fully accepted her into the royal fold, had in fact envisioned the future of the crown in entirely different hands. This unexpected discovery forced Camilla to reevaluate every gesture, every spoken word, and every glance of the late Queen during their last encounters. The Princess of Wales, Catherine, was informed of the important letter's contents not by her husband, Prince William, as one might logically assume, but directly by Princess Anne. This confidential conversation took place in the strictest privacy, in one of Kensington Palace's private residences, far from the curious eyes and ears of numerous palace staff. Princess Anne, true to her unwavering directness and impartiality, did not beat around the bush. "Your mother-in-law saw something in you that others are only just beginning to grasp," Anne stated with characteristic resolve, handing Catherine an exact copy of the letter. The Princess of Wales's reaction was typical of her nature. She maintained outward composure, but was deeply shaken internally. Catherine fell into a prolonged silence, carefully reading the lines penned by the late Queen Elizabeth, before barely audibly murmuring, "I never asked for this." In response, Anne, possessing her inherent worldly wisdom, remarked, "True leaders never seek power. It finds them." These words, according to a trusted confidant present during the conversation, left an indelible mark on Catherine. In the following days, noticeable changes occurred in Catherine's demeanor. Those who worked with her daily observed an unprecedented confidence in her movements, a distinct firmness in her voice, and an extraordinary meticulousness and heightened attention to detail in her public appearances. The Princess of Wales chose not to openly discuss the contents of the letter, not even with her husband William, yet her behavior unequivocally demonstrated that she fully grasped the depth and weight of the burden of responsibility placed upon her. Prince William found himself in a truly unprecedented and incredibly difficult situation. On one hand, his entire life had been dedicated to strictly following traditions, according to which he was meant to become the next monarch, taking the crown immediately after his father. On the other hand, the message left by his late grandmother unequivocally indicated that she saw the future of the royal crown in his wife's hands. Sources close to the prince anxiously described his deep internal struggle. He genuinely loves Catherine more than life, and is firmly convinced that she would be an outstanding monarch, capable of leading the nation forward, shared one of his longtime and trusted friends. However, he also fully realizes that such a turn of events would require a complete and radical re-evaluation of his own role, and essentially, his entire life's purpose. During this period, William began to spend significantly more time in solitude. He was often seen taking long, contemplative walks through the extensive grounds of Kensington Palace, or secluding himself in his private study. His staff noted that the prince became noticeably more engrossed in his thoughts, often interrupting important meetings to make confidential personal calls, and was seen on several occasions in deep and lively conversation with Catherine in their private chambers. Adding particular weight to Prince William's burden was the realization that his father, King Charles, undoubtedly expected his absolute and unwavering support in resolving this unprecedented dynastic crisis. However, the prince's own heart and rational mind persistently told him that his late grandmother's wise decision regarding the choice of the future monarch was absolutely correct. While the royal dynasty was undergoing a period of internal discord and difficult disagreements, public opinion consistently favored Catherine. Digital platforms and social media were rapidly filled with numerous publications, expressing admiration for her unwavering composure, innate elegance, and steadfast devotion to duty. Hashtags such as Catherine, Future Queen, gained unprecedented popularity, despite the absence of any official confirmation regarding the contents of the Queen's letter. The results of sociological studies conducted by leading analytical agencies proved to be quite remarkable. Over 60% of surveyed respondents expressed a firm conviction that Catherine was the ideal candidate for the role of future queen, while support for the traditional line of succession plummeted to an unprecedented historic low. The responses from ordinary citizens were particularly telling. Mary Johnson, a 67-year-old pensioner from Yorkshire, accurately articulated the prevailing sentiment of many. Catherine has shown us the true meaning of being a princess. She has never been a source of scandal, has always been there when her presence was needed, and raises her children with such dignity. If Queen Elizabeth herself saw the monarchy's future in her, then who are we to question her foresight? Just 2 weeks after Princess Anne's departure from Edinburgh, an event occurred that could very well rewrite the pages of British history. At the secluded Sandringham residence, deliberately removed from the bustling London intrigues and the intrusive attention of the press, 4 key figures of the monarchy gathered: King Charles, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and, to the complete surprise of many, Princess Anne herself, who had secretly arrived from her voluntary seclusion. This meeting lasted over 6 hours. According to the only permitted witness, the king's personal secretary, whose role was limited to taking minutes, the atmosphere in the room was extremely tense, yet maintained strict civility. King Charles immediately began to present his position, aiming to convince all present that his late mother's letter had been written in a state of illness, and therefore could not be considered an official will or testament. Princess Anne, known for her unwavering directness, immediately and sharply countered. "Mother was in full health when she wrote this letter. I was with her that day. She knew what she was doing." These words, delivered with Anne's characteristic uncompromising candor, silenced the king, depriving him of any further opportunity to object. Princess Catherine then took the floor. Her address, according to those present, paradoxically combined genuine humility with undeniable power. She spoke of a deep understanding of responsibility, her sincere love for the country and its people, and an unconditional willingness to serve, while clearly stating that she would never seek power at any cost. "If this is the late Queen's will, I am prepared to bear this burden, but only if the family is united in this decision," she declared, emphasizing the importance of consensus. William, who had been profoundly silent until this moment, finally broke it. His spoken words became the truly pivotal moment of the entire meeting. "I have prepared my whole life to be king, but perhaps my true role is to support the one who will be a better monarch than I could ever be." News of the momentous conversation at Sandringham quickly spread among the senior members of the royal family, sparking a wave of discussions. Princess Alexandra, the late Queen's cousin, was among the first to immediately express open support for Elizabeth's decision. "Lilibet was always wise," she shared in a private conversation, using the Queen's affectionate childhood nickname. "If she saw the future in Catherine, then so it should be." The Duke of Gloucester, known as one of the family's most conservative members, initially displayed a degree of skepticism. However, after a private audience with Catherine, during which they thoroughly discussed the monarchy's prospects, his opinion changed dramatically. "She understands traditions better than many of us who were born into them," he later admitted, expressing his surprise and respect. Particularly significant was the support from Princess Anne, who, despite her long-standing withdrawal from active royal duties, still wielded enormous influence within the family circle. Her public statement, though extremely brief, was perceived as an absolute official endorsement. My mother always knew what she was doing. Her last will must be fulfilled. The initial situation, stemming from the discovery of the late Queen Elizabeth's letter, presented the United Kingdom with a complex constitutional dilemma. Although the formal order of succession is thoroughly regulated by the Act of Succession, passed in 2013, which unambiguously defines the sequence of ascension to the throne, the personal will of a reigning monarch, especially when recorded in writing, carries immense moral weight and profound historical significance. This created tension between the letter of the law and the spirit of monarchical tradition. Leading experts in UK constitutional law were divided in their assessments of this unprecedented situation. Professor Robert Blackburn of the prestigious King's College London firmly maintained that a sovereign's personal wishes do not possess the legal force to alter the legislatively enshrined order of succession. However, his respected colleague, Professor Vernon Bogdanor of Oxford University, strongly disagreed, emphasizing that the British Constitution is based on precedents and traditions. If the Queen expressed her will regarding the future of the throne, it creates a unique precedent that cannot be ignored. Thus, two fundamentally different perspectives on the nature of the British constitutional framework clashed. Under the circumstances, the Prime Minister found himself in an exceptionally delicate position. On one hand, the government had a direct obligation to unconditionally support the lawfully enthroned monarch, King Charles. On the other hand, a complete disregard for Queen Elizabeth's last expressed will could provoke a deep constitutional crisis and, no less importantly, seriously undermine the legitimacy of the entire monarchical system in the eyes of the general public. He faced a choice between strict adherence to the law and the necessity of maintaining public support for the institution of the monarchy. News of the internal disagreements within the British royal family quickly spread across the globe. Monarchs of other nations followed the unfolding events with heightened attention, keenly aware that the outcome of this burgeoning crisis could significantly impact the public perception of monarchy as an institution. King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden, in a private conversation with the British ambassador, expressed his full support for any decision that would strengthen the monarchical system and serve the highest interests of the people. Queen Margrethe II of Denmark was more forthright in her judgment, stating, "Elizabeth was the wisest of us all. If she saw the future in Catherine, perhaps we should listen." Particularly close attention to the situation was paid in Commonwealth countries, where the British monarch traditionally serves as head of state. The Governor-General of Canada immediately held emergency consultations with the Prime Minister, discussing possible scenarios and their potential consequences in detail. In Australia, meanwhile, discussions about Republican status were reignited, and it was notable that even monarchists were divided in their preferences regarding the path forward. After a week of intense deliberation and numerous consultations, Catherine made a decision that surprised even those closest to her. Instead of actively seeking recognition of her rights based on the late Queen's letter, she chose a different path, one of service and patience. In a private conversation with William, she expressed her position, saying, "If I am truly worthy of the trust the late Queen placed in me, I must prove it not with words, but with deeds. Time will tell if she was right." This decision was a clear testament to Princess Catherine's deep understanding of the true essence of leadership, which does not dictate but earns recognition. She redoubled her efforts in carrying out her royal duties, taking on additional patronages and initiating new projects. Her work in charity, support for educational programs, and active participation in crucial diplomatic events gained unprecedented scale and significance. Particularly noteworthy were her consistent steps aimed at modernizing the monarchical institution, striving to make it more accessible and relevant to contemporary society, while meticulously safeguarding centuries-old traditions. It was this skillful blend of innovation and continuity that shaped her unique style and became her hallmark. Over time, almost imperceptibly to an outside observer, new contours began to emerge within the strict royal protocol. Princess Catherine increasingly occupied a central position at state receptions and official ceremonies, serving as a key representative of the reigning dynasty. Her public speeches gained undeniable authority, and her viewpoint became decisive in the discussion and adoption of momentous decisions. His Majesty King Charles, likely realizing the irreversibility of the transformations taking place, systematically began to delegate increasingly significant powers and responsibilities to Princess Catherine. The processes set in motion within the royal family unfolded so subtly and seamlessly that many external observers initially failed to grasp the essence of the transformations. However, those who closely followed royal affairs unfailingly noted the emergence of an entirely new dynamic in the interpersonal relationships within the family. Prince William, for his part, began to demonstrate an unprecedented role of support for his wife, a stark departure from centuries-old canons of traditional hierarchy. His sincere willingness to step into the background, allowing his wife to shine and demonstrate her abilities, earned genuine approval and admiration from broad segments of the population, vividly demonstrating his profound understanding of the principles of modern governance and leadership. The momentous departure of Her Royal Highness Princess Anne from the Scottish capital, Edinburgh, served as a powerful catalyst that initiated a series of interconnected events, culminating in truly fundamental transformations in the centuries-old fabric of the British monarchy. Her decision to withdraw from active public royal duties was not an act of retreat or an escape from responsibilities, but a deliberate strategic maneuver aimed at forcing the royal family to confront the emerging challenges and recognize the new reality. Princess Anne, possessing keen insight, deeply understood that her physical presence and, no less importantly, her unspoken support for the established traditional order could only slow down or even impede the onset of vitally important changes. Her voluntary stepping aside created a vacuum that could only be filled by a person truly ready to bear the burden of responsibility for the future fate and prosperity of the monarchy. In one of her last public interviews, given only a few months after her decisive departure, Princess Anne thoroughly explained the true motives behind her actions. She stated, "Sometimes the greatest gift you can give those you love is to allow them to find their own path. My mother saw the future more clearly than any of us. My duty was to ensure her vision had a chance to materialize." A year after Princess Anne's departure, the British monarchy entered a completely new phase of its existence. Although King Charles formally still occupied the throne, real governance and de facto leadership gradually shifted towards Catherine. This transition of power occurred so naturally and harmoniously that many citizens began to perceive it as an inevitable and logical development of events. Catherine, for her part, did not seek official affirmation of her status. Instead, all her efforts were directed at convincingly demonstrating her ability to lead the country and the monarchy into the future. Her approach to fulfilling royal duties represented a unique combination of centuries-old dignity with modern openness, thereby forming an entirely new model of monarchical leadership. Catherine's popularity among the populace steadily increased. Sociological surveys showed that over 70% of Britons saw her as the ideal future queen. What was even more significant, the younger generation, which traditionally viewed the institution of monarchy with a certain skepticism and detachment, began to show genuine interest and active support, largely due to her innovative and modern approach to carrying out royal duties. The international community also gradually recognized and acknowledged the new reality of the British monarchy. Catherine became an honored and welcome guest at numerous international events, and her diplomatic efforts and initiatives received high praise from leading world leaders. The President of France noted in a private conversation, "The Princess of Wales embodies the best traditions of the British monarchy, while demonstrating an understanding of modern challenges. She is a bridge between the past and the future." The German Chancellor expressed herself even more frankly and directly. In a world where leadership is often associated with grand statements and dramatic gestures, Catherine shows the strength of quiet dignity and consistent service. The path taken by Princess Anne after her departure from Edinburgh, and the series of subsequent events, marked a fundamental shift in the annals of the British monarchy. What was initially perceived solely as an internal family drama gradually transformed into a profound narrative about how true leadership finds its authentic path. Overcoming centuries-old traditions and established expectations. In this context, the late Queen Elizabeth's letter, carefully preserved in Princess Anne's leather diary, proved to be far more than just the last will of a fading monarch. It presented itself to the world as a prophetic vision of the future. Catherine, an individual who never sought power and did not pursue it, gradually became the living embodiment of the very leadership that the modern monarchy so acutely needed to remain relevant in a changing world. Princess Anne, leaving Edinburgh in complete silence, without the slightest public fanfare, perhaps performed the most fateful act of her life. Her voluntary departure created the necessary space, allowing the future to find its own way, and true leadership to manifest in its full splendor. Her enduring legacy lies not so much in her impeccable years of devoted service to the crown, but in the profound wisdom demonstrated at the moment she realized the necessity of stepping back to make way for others capable of leading. Today, looking upon the British monarchy, we see an institution that has remarkably adapted to the dynamic realities of modernity, without losing an ounce of its dignity or historical significance. Catherine, guided by the late Queen's perceptive wisdom and wholeheartedly supported by the sincere love of the people, has become the undisputed symbol of a new era. This is an era where true leadership is defined not by noble birth, but by strength of character, not by blind adherence to traditions, but by an unwavering ability to serve society. The fate of Princess Anne, her unnoticed departure, and the far-reaching consequences of that choice, serve as a vivid reminder that sometimes the most significant transformations stem not from turbulent revolutions, but from the deep foresight of those who recognize the advent of an era of necessary change. In the silent Edinburgh morning, as Anne left the familiar walls of her home, she was not merely making a physical departure, she was opening the gates to the future. For it is behind the impregnable walls of royal residences that events unfold, which subsequently determine the direction of development and shape the destinies of entire nations.